Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live under the rule of a foreign nation, abiding by laws that do not serve your people? Today, we dive into the thrilling story of the United States independence, an event that not only shaped a nation but also inspired revolutions around the world. But what if the American colonists had never made the brave decision to fight for their freedom? Let's find out. We start our journey in the late 1700s, when America was a collection of colonies governed by the distant British Crown. Unfair taxes and duties, like the infamous Tea Act, were the last straw for the colonists, whose voices were ignored in the English Parliament. But how did mere colonists decide to confront the world's greatest empire? The answer lies in unity and courage. Figures like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin were not just leaders. They were visionaries who saw beyond oppression. The Declaration of Independence, signed on July 4, 1776, was not just a document. It was a manifesto of freedom, equality, and the pursuit of happiness. But what were the risks? Treason and the gallows awaited them at the slightest sign of failure. The ensuing war was brutal and challenging. Clashes like the Battle of Saratoga and the ultimate victory at Yorktown are examples of the colonists' determination. But how did a group of rebels manage to defeat a superpower? The answer might surprise you. Strategy, international alliances, and a bit of luck. The independence of the United States was more than a revolt. It was the birth of a nation based on ideals that many of us cherish to this day. But what if America had remained under British rule? Perhaps the very notion of democracy as we know it today would be drastically different. History is a fabric made of what-ifs, but one thing is certain: the courage of a few can change the fate of many. What would you have done in that era? Leave your comment below and let's continue this conversation. The Spark of Revolt. Have you ever imagined what it would be like to live in a place where decisions about your everyday life are made by people who have never set foot on your land, who do not understand your struggles or your needs? This was the scenario in the American colonies in the 18th century, under British rule. Governed by laws and taxes decided thousands of miles away, the colonies increasingly felt the weight of the British Crown, a presence that was both distant and suffocating. Tired of excessive taxes and having no active voice in the English Parliament, the colonists began to question, why should they obey a king who seemed to care more about his own pocket than the welfare of his subjects? This questioning became more acute with the implementation of laws that directly affected daily life and local economy, such as the Stamp Act and the Tea Act, which imposed taxes on legal documents, newspapers, and even tea, an essential commodity at the time. Discontent grew as new taxes were imposed, and the British response to complaints was often more repression. It was in Boston that the Spark of Revolt ignited with full force. On a cold December night in 1773, a group of colonists, disguised as Mohawk Indians, boarded ships anchored in Boston Harbor and threw boxes of tea into the sea. This event, which would become known as the Boston Tea Party, was not just a protest against taxation without representation. It was a clear and bold rejection of British imperial rule. This act of defiance marked a point of no return. Meetings and protests became more frequent and fervent. Leaders like Samuel Adams and Patrick Henry began to articulate a more organized response, increasingly using the idea of independence as a call to arms. Patrick Henry's words, "Give me liberty or give me death," echoed the growing sentiment among the colonists, who saw revolt not just as a possibility, but as a necessity. Among secret assemblies and fiery speeches, the idea of an independent America began to take shape. The colonists knew that confronting the world's greatest empire would not be easy, but the alternative, living without freedom, was much worse. Armed with courage and strengthened by years of accumulated injustices, they were ready to turn their frustration into action, marking the beginning of one of the greatest revolutions in human history. The pioneers of independence. As discontent simmered in the American colonies, figures emerged who would not only stand out in the fight for independence, but would also shape the future of a new nation. Men like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin were more than leaders. They were the bearers of the flame of freedom, each bringing their own vision and skills to the revolutionary movement. Washington, with his leadership and military tactics, would be the indispensable commander of the Continental Army. Jefferson, a thinker and philosopher, would draft the Declaration of Independence, articulating the ideals of freedom and equality that would resonate for generations. Franklin, with his wit and diplomacy, would be crucial in garnering international support, especially from France. These pioneers of independence understood deeply the risks involved in their struggle. Each step towards independence was also a step towards possible brutal retaliation by the British Empire. By signing the Declaration of Independence on July 4, 1776, they were not merely proclaiming a new country. They were, in fact, signing what could be a death warrant. Their courage came with a clear vision that the principles of self-government and freedom were values worth risking everything for. Beyond these iconic figures, many others took an active part in the cause. Alexander Hamilton, a young immigrant of humble origins, emerged as a vital voice in the economic and legal arguments against British policies. John Adams, a lawyer and politician, was known for his fervent rhetoric and his unwavering commitment to justice and fair governance. Together, these men formed the core of a revolution that was both intellectual and physical, fighting not just on the battlefield, but also in the minds and hearts of people. Through their leadership and sacrifice, they instigated a change that would reverberate not just within their own borders, but across the world. They inspired others to fight for their freedoms and established a new model of government that prioritized the right of the people to choose their leaders and determine their own destiny. The revolution they led was a spark that would ignite the desire for freedom in many other countries in the following decades, proving that ideas have strength when defended with courage and conviction. If you are enjoying this type of content, don't forget to follow our channel, Wealth Baron, for more informative videos. The War for Freedom. The journey to independence for the American colonies was marked not just by debates and declarations, but also by intense and decisive armed conflicts. As tensions transformed into open confrontations, the colonists, initially poorly equipped and disorganized, found themselves facing the world's most powerful army. The War for Freedom, as it became known, was a series of battles that tested the resilience and determination of the Americans in ways few could have predicted. The official start of the war occurred in 1775, with the clashes at Lexington and Concord, where the famous shot heard round the world was fired. This was the ignition point that led to the Siege of Boston, showing that the colonists were ready and willing to fight for their freedom. Led by figures like George Washington, the colonists began to form a more structured army, despite their limitations in terms of training and supplies. The war stretched over several years with moments of despair and triumph for the revolutionary forces. One turning point was the Battle of Saratoga in 1777, a significant victory that boosted the morale of the colonists and proved crucial in gaining France's support. This external support, not just in terms of recognition, but also military and financial resources, was vital for sustaining the fight against Britain. As the war progressed, the colonists' strategies evolved. It wasn't just about direct confrontations, but also guerrilla warfare, ambushes, and a series of strategic retreats that allowed them to prolong the war and wear down the British forces. The climax of the war came in 1781, with the Battle of Yorktown, where the combination of American and French forces managed to surround and force the surrender of the British Army, led by General Cornwallis. This event not only marked the end of a battle, but the beginning of the end of British control over the American colonies. The peace treaties, particularly the Treaty of Paris in 1783, formally sealed the independence of the United States, recognizing the sovereignty of a new nation that had emerged from the ashes of war. The war for freedom was a testament to the power of collective determination and the unwavering desire for self-government. The legacy of this struggle resonates to this day, reminding us that the ideals of freedom and justice need to be defended constantly, sometimes at the cost of great sacrifices. Share this video with your friends and family who love history, and inspire them to learn and reflect more. Conclusion. The independence of the United States was not just a revolutionary milestone in global history, but also a powerful symbol of human aspirations for freedom and self-determination. The bloody battles, fiery speeches, and immense sacrifices that defined this struggle were not in vain. They gave birth to a nation founded on principles of equality, justice, and individual freedom. The outcome of the American War of Independence reverberated far beyond its borders, inspiring similar movements around the world and shaping the course of modern history. The proclamation of independence in 1776 was an act of courage and vision, marking the beginning of an experiment in governance that would influence concepts of democracy and freedom on a global scale. The pioneers of this revolution not only fought against an empire, but also against the social and political conventions of the time. They ventured into unknown territory with the belief that government should serve the people, not the other way around. Moreover, the American struggle for independence highlighted the importance of international alliances and diplomacy, showing how external support can be crucial for the success of revolutionary movements. The collaboration between the American colonists and European nations like France was key to the success of independence. This serves as a valuable reminder that even in the pursuit of national objectives, international cooperation and understanding play indispensable roles. Finally, the story of American independence is a narrative of transformation and resistance that continues to inspire those who fight for justice and freedom around the world. It teaches us that significant changes require both vision and action, and that the principles of freedom and justice must be constantly defended and reaffirmed. America, as conceived in those early days of its existence, was not just a new country, but a new and revolutionary idea of how a country could be governed. This idea endures, challenging and inspiring generations to reflect on the true meaning of freedom.